peace. Is there anybody speaking?
No, everyone is on.
You see, today is 21st of September, which is the International Day of Peace. And today is also the birth anniversary of Swami Agnivesh. I don't think there is any coincidence in that. There is nothing incidental. I think it is very auspicious that Swamiji was born on this day, and it is also designated as International Day of Peace. So we are here basically, and I think many of the panelists who are here have been closely associated with Swami Agnivesh ji, and most may have also heard about him. And it is a tribute, as a matter of tribute to him, because he passed away and left us last year on 11th of September, about a little more than a year now. So we have come together to commemorate his memory, to celebrate his work. And now we would like to start with a little, with a homage to Swamiji. We will, because it's a webinar, we can't have a minute silence. So instead, what we are going to do is Swamiji, we have, he had a very favorite poem, a kavita in Hindi, which he used to recite always. It's a very inspiring poem. We will have that poem, audio of that poem, and as we are listening to that poem, let us think about him. And after the poem is over, the kavita is over, we'll just think about him, pay homage to him silently in our hearts for about 10 seconds, then we will rejoin back. So please, now we have the kavita, the poem. It's titled Sabse Khatarnak. I request
मेहनत की दूत सबसे खतरनाक नहीं होती, पुलिस की मां सबसे खतरनाक नहीं होती, गद्दारी बोझ की मुट्ठी सबसे खतरनाक नहीं होती। मेहनत की दूत सबसे खतरनाक नहीं होती, पुलिस की मार सबसे खतरनाक नहीं होती, गद्दारी बोझ की मुट्ठी सबसे खतरनाक नहीं होती। सबसे खतरनाक होता है मुर्दा शांति से हट जाना, न होना तड़प का सब सहन कर जाना, घर से निकलना काम पर और काम से लौटकर घर जाना। सबसे खतरनाक होता है हमारे सपनों का मर जाना। सबसे खतरनाक होता है हमारे सपनों का मर जाना, हमारे सपनों का मर जाना।
Thank you all very much. Now, this poem, this kavita by Swamiji in Hindi, maybe some of you have not been able to follow this, but essentially it speaks about the tragedy of the loss of our dreams, the death of our dreams. Swamiji was always propagating that dreams should be followed, dreams should be pursued with passion, and all his life he has been pursuing dreams with passion, all his dreams. And I think it is because of him that many people like me were inspired by him in getting into social activism. I first got into social activism in 1991, and that was the time when I had met Swamiji, and I was so impressed by his commitment, his courage, his passion, that that really impressed me, and I started getting more and more involved in activism. And I'm sure there are many people here in the participants and amongst our other speakers here who have been equally inspired by Swamiji, that changed the course of their lives. So the best tribute that all of us can pay to Swamiji, to see that his dreams and our dreams don't die, and that we craft our world in such a way that it becomes the ideal dream for all. Now, having said that, I would just briefly talk about the objectives of this seminar. Like Swamiji was a man of faith, was a man of action, was a man of peace, and basically he was also a man of results. A lot of things which he had done had borne fruit. So for this seminar also, I feel we should try and make it memorable as the contribution of Swamiji to this world. And for this, I would like to request all the panel members, when they are making a presentation, to, because the time is short, we've got about 2 hours in which about 12 panel members from different parts of the country, of the world, are going to speak. So 10 minutes each. I know it's a very less time, and 5 minutes for Father Walton Thampu and Professor Glenn to talk about Swamiji. But still, within that, if you can come out with some concrete action plans, so that the takeaway for the participants here is something which is concrete and which they may be able to implement and carry forward in their lives. So with this, I would like to now request Father Walton Thampu to please pay his homage to Swamiji, and there can be no better person than Father Walton Thampu. Father Thampu has been the principal of St. Stephen's College, which is the premier institution in India for higher education, and he has been a very close associate of Swamiji for over 30 years, and they have together written a number of articles which was published in leading newspapers in the country, and which really set the agenda for peace and communal harmony. And they have also, co-authored a book recently, which is still to be published. And I think both were men of faith, of intellect, of action, and of peace. And I would like, I think it will not be out of form here to say that I have known both of them, and I think both have been soulmates, heartmates, and action mates. They have been together in all these things together, and there can be none better qualified to speak of Swamiji. And so I present to you Father Walton Thampu. Father Thampu. Please unmute yourself, Father Thampu, and please come.
Thank you, and warm greetings to all members on the panel and those in attendance within India and other countries. I consider it a very special honor to be called upon to pay my homage to someone who has been an unfailing source of inspiration to me for, as was mentioned, for over 30 years. Now, I would, given the constraint of time, read out a text, but do so meditatively so that we can remember Swamiji through these humble words that I offer to all of us. It is profoundly appropriate that today, the International Day of Peace, we remember with Reverend Swami Agnivesh, who was an inspired prophet of peace and a fearless defender of justice, especially justice for the poor and the oppressed. To be inspired is to be filled and led by something beyond oneself, which I believe is the essence of selflessness. To Swamiji, selflessness was the essence of spiritual purity. Not surprisingly, the symbolism of fire fascinated him. Saffron was an understatement for him. He clad himself in flaming saffron. In him, saffron caught fire. He chose to be Agnivesh, one clad in fire. The activist that he was, Swamiji understood spirituality as social spirituality. Jesus came to preach the good news to the poor. The very same mission became in Swamiji's life an unrelenting pursuit of social justice. To him, Lord Ram was an icon of righteousness. So he was pained and angered by Lord Ram's degradation into a mascot of communal politics. Muhammad was the prophet of universal brotherhood. Swamiji mirrored this in his vision as a global citizen. Swamiji embodied Lord Buddha's compassion in the socio-political domain as the mission to liberate and rehabilitate victims of modern-day slavery. The authentic evidence that one is divinely inspired is that one's life becomes inspiring, as indeed Swamiji's was. Of course, he was limited by the incapacity of his contemporaries to be inspired. As John Milton said, one can only take a horse to water, but not make it drink. So judged by the scale of changes Swamiji wrought, he would rank only with personages like Jesus Christ, who died seemingly defeated. It is not by the immediacy of their success that souls like Swami Agnivesh should be evaluated, but by the spiritual freedom they exemplified and by their willingness to pay the ultimate price for what they held to be the mission of their life. The one thing he asked of me on the day he was hospitalized for liver transplant was to write out the essence of the many discussions we shared regarding the need to shift from religion to spirituality. He desired earnestly that a global debate on religion be initiated. He was greatly worried that communal hate, weaponized by demagogues and incipient dictators, was a serious threat to peace and sanity. To his last breath, he maintained a quality and vigor of thinking that I have not encountered in anyone else in the religious sphere. I dedicated my recent book titled Thoughts for Trying Times to Swamiji, describing him as a lightning in the mind. I'm glad to say that my forthcoming book titled Beyond Religion, Imaging a New Humanity, inspired and approved by Swamiji, is now under print with Piparan Books and Media, UK. It is likely to be released in October this year. I hope it will keep alive the fire of this unique spiritual activist who inhaled love and exhaled it as righteous indignation against all that is vile and wicked in the world we love. So if I am to identify an item of action, I would say initiate a sustained debate on religion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Father Walton Tampu, and we appreciate your sticking to time. We would like to request that, for all the speakers, just to make them aware of the time at just about a minute before the time is up. We will just give an indication so that you can understand and you can conclude, so that we can finish in time. We are going good as far as timing is concerned. And at this point, I would like to share that, all our panelists are here, and I'd like to recognize and welcome the new ones who have joined now in the last few minutes. Vittal Rao Aryaji, who has been a very close associate of Swami Agnivesh then Kanak Mani Dixit ji from Nepal. Then we have Mr. Dr. Glenn Martin from USA and Mr. Saravana Muttuji from Sri Lanka. Then Mr. Karamat Ali from Pakistan. Then Jill Carl Harris from all over the globe. And she's immersed herself in India for many years now. And Peter Jacob from Pakistan. So now, without any much time waste, I would like to invite Professor Glenn Martin to talk about Swamiji's global initiative for peace. Professor Glenn Martin is at Rutherford University in Virginia, USA, and is indeed himself a world citizen. He has worked for Unified World for many years and came in close association with Swamiji and to craft a world of equality, equity, peace, and justice. Professor Martin and Swamiji together conceived and initiated many strategies and actions for a better and more harmonious world. I invite Professor Martin to share the contributions of Swamiji to global peace. Professor Martin, the globe is yours.
Thank you very much. I very much appreciate this meeting of all these people who have been influenced by Swami Agnovich, and I'm very honored to be part of it. I became good friends with Swami Agnovich during the last 5 years of his life. We first met when we were both speakers at Aligarh Muslim University. He spoke about Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, the world is one family, and I spoke about uniting humanity under the Constitution for the Federation of Earth. He followed up with me later on and wanted to know more about the Earth Constitution, and we soon became friends and collaborators on behalf of the Constitution and the birth of a new world. He said he had worked with the UN in the past concerning his central issue of the scourge of bonded labor, and that the UN was never able to do much. When my wife and I visited India every year, we would stay with him in his New Delhi apartments or his ashram in the countryside near Delhi. Swamiji refurbished his downtown Delhi offices to make space for our organization concerning the Earth Constitution so that we could have a global communications center there. My interactions with him I was always impressed by his simplicity, his authenticity, his honesty, as well as his great intelligence. There was none of the pretense or elitism that one sometimes finds in people who wear the orange robes, the saffron robes. Early in his life, I taught his message in my classes. I was teaching ethics in society at my university, and I brought Swami Agnovich's writings into those classes. Early in his life, he had understood that religion is not about beliefs and rituals, but it's about love, justice, and truth. It is about love, justice, and truth of God becoming incarnated in us, in the world, and in human history. He believed that if we receive the spirit of love, justice, and truth in our own lives, that is the spirit of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, then we will become social, political, and economic spokespersons and radicals. We will be speaking about our dreams for the kind of world that we should be living in. This is because our social, political, and economic institutions, as they now exist, are deeply corrupted. They're flawed, and they're run in the interests of the rich and the powerful. They do not serve the interests of women, the poor, the oppressed, and the exploited. That is, they do not serve the interests of the majority of people who live on our precious planet Earth. I believe very much the same. And this is why Swamiji and I understood one another. And this is our bond. This is why we had a bond concerning the Constitution for the Federation of Earth, because the Earth Constitution calls for a redesign of our global society so that the global social, political, and economic systems of our planet are predicated on the common good of everybody and the fundamental human rights of each. Rights that include providing the conditions necessary for people to develop what Swamiji called our hidden human potential. Our present institutions are predicated on money, power, endless debt of the poor to the rich. They are predicated on sovereign nation-state organizations using war and violence and imperialism. Swami Yajnavich's consciousness manifested what some spiritual thinkers have called a cosmic consciousness. The ground of being identified in the Vedas and Upanishads lived through him, just as it should be living through all of us. He was a theological dualist, not a monist like Shankara, he told me, because he did not see this world as illusion or a contingent dream of God. The important thing, this is my last paragraph here. The important thing about law that Swamiji understood is expressed in my own declaration that democratic world law is the 21st century form of love. Swamiji criticized the laws of India and or their lack of enforcement, so that the Earth Constitution understands that real love can and must be institutionalized in a global public authority that operates around the principle of unity and diversity and the equal dignity of each and every person. That is, we require a global public authority that operates around the principles of love, justice, and truth. For all these reasons, it is my great honor to help inaugurate this tribute to Swami Yajnavich on his birthday of September 21st. I want to say thank you to all who have participated with us today, and the concrete action that he and I worked on for the last 5 years of his life is the promotion of the Constitution for the Federation of Earth. And you may know that under the authority of the Earth Constitution, we are holding the Provisional World Parliament in New Delhi this December 10th through 12th. Anybody who is interested can participate in this. It's a wonderful action for transforming our world, and you can find the way to do this at www.wcpa.global. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you very much, Professor Glenn. It has been wonderful, very befitting homage, and I am also happy that you have stuck to the time. Really appreciate that. Now we will move on to Dr. Ram Punyani from India. He's been a professor of biomedical engineering with the Indian Institute of Technology, Bombay, a very premier institution. And he's gained amazing command over medieval Indian history that he uses with precision and deadly effect to challenge Hindu fundamentalism in India through his lectures, articles, and videos. But we have one complaint against him. He has become the Kohinoor for dismantling bigotry, and Kohinoors cannot have any clothes. Always wonder what will happen after him. Ram Bhai, you have to produce at least 10 like you. Only then we have some hope in this country and in the world. So now presenting Dr. Ram Punyani to speak on impact of religious divide and role of interfaith initiatives to secure peace in India. Ram Bhai, the floor is yours. Yeah. And before you start, Ram Bhai, I'd just like to recognize that Admiral Ramdas, former Chief of Indian Navy, and Ms. Lalita Ramdas, his partner, and who was also the former global chairperson of Greenpeace, are also with us and they have joined us. Thank you very much, Ramdas Sahib and Lalia. Welcome.
Thank you, Mazhar Bhai. It's a great pleasure to be amongst the peace lovers and friends from all over the world who are concerned with peace, harmony, and justice in the world. I must congratulate Mazhar Bhai and Kowa for taking this great initiative, because in the current times, the type of things we are witnessing in the name of religion is really horrifying. And this is where I remember I can say, a very, very senior friend, Swami Agnivesh, who actually was wearing saffron, as has been pointed out, but he also served to tell us that saffron color is not a monopoly of a divisive politics. It's a color which is for fighting for justice. This he proved in his own lifetime. And as religion is being misinterpreted, I must say religion is being misused. To go further, I will say it is being abused for certain political powers in India and globally. At that time, to understand Swamiji's understanding about religion and his social engagement is so much important for us. Being coming from a Arya Samaj, he brought forward one of the very diverse traditions of Hindu religion, that is a Vedic tradition, which is against idol worship and which believes in imbibing the best of the thoughts from all over the world. I was very impressed that Swamiji has a very rational way of thinking, and many of the things which people have been claiming just to glorify some things which don't exist, he used logic, rational thinking in the case of Amarnath Yatra and in many other instances when he told that all the claims of plastic surgery being in ancient India are a hoax. And that showed that his thinking is spiritual. It is not bounded by the clerical elements only. And I must say that his campaign against bonded labor, which led him to be the global leader for abolition of discrimination of all forms. And in India, we witnessed Roop Kavar Sati. I hope you all know immolation of the wife on the funeral pyre of the husband. And he was so agitated by this that he launched a national campaign against this, which caught the attention of the whole country, and which was an important stepping stone in justice for women, in justice for girls. That is one of his contributions. And second, if we see that he did not restrict religion to mere rituals, and he was very critical of just those who identified religion with rituals and all that. Basically, what we understand religion as morality, religion as love for the human society, that he exemplified very much in the country. And when I came on the scene, of course, I had the honor of staying in his ashram, sharing platforms with him, and also enjoying his hospitality occasionally. But what impressed me most was his humble nature, very affectionate, very loving. But this was not only for few individuals. This, I think, was for the whole humanity, if one can put it like that. And because he was opposing the abuse of Hindu religion by certain political forces, he was many times attacked also, and he was many times made to face very embarrassing situations, for which we all felt very sad. And even now we feel very sad the way he was treated by communal forces. Now, in addition to all this, he was a strong proponent of diversity. He was a strong proponent of opposing communal forces. And that's where I learned a lot, that one has to be committed to the values of love. One has to be committed to the values of social harmony, which goes along with justice. And this is his message for the whole, all our social workers, all the country and all the humanity, that unless there is justice, the religion's rituals merely are not going to help us. And this is where I think Mazhar-bhai's complaint is very right, that people like me who are trying to engage a bit are not making much headway. And we have to have people, we have to have a series of people who, steeped in the values of Gandhi, Swami Agnivesh, Asghar Ali Engineer, and Stan Swami, stand for the morality of religion and equally stand for justice. So how do we do it? because what violence I see in India here, sorry, I'll be restricting myself a bit to India. And what we see in India is that there is a lot of violence in the name of religion. This violence is orchestrated because hate has been drilled into the society. In turn, this hate has been manufactured, because I believe love is natural and hatred is manufactured by politics. So this hate has been manufactured by misconceptions and biases in India, particularly around medieval history and the other small patterns of minority lives. So talking concretely, I think we need to combat this hatred. We need to combat this attitude of violence in this society. So how do we do it? And that is some concrete challenge we have to take it up. First, I believe that in India at least, and also probably globally, because globally also, recently we have seen the coming to power of Taliban because American armies left. And again, many people feel Taliban are a symbol of Islam, which they are not. They again have been created in the name of a religious indoctrination in the light of this global control over oil resources. I will not go into details of that. But basically, what I feel that the world has got what Noam Chomsky calls a consent has been manufactured based on misconceptions. These misconceptions about religion, other communities, and the positive opinion about the society and the values has to be brought in, for which we need probably a series of activists who are understanding this, who are made aware of the reality of the society. And around this, we build a series of peace centers. I think this is a time that we launch a local and global movement for peace centers which equip the people with the humanism of religions, which equip the people of, for example, the values of Indian Constitution, which equip the people of the values of United Nations Charter of Human Rights. So these are the three foundations around which we have to initiate a series of peace centers. We have through these peace centers, we have to give a message of peace, that religion, as in India, we have a great traditions of Sufi tradition and Bhakti tradition, and both these saints talked of love. That's why majority of the people were following them at that time. It is in current times that the politics in the name of religion is been creating hatred, and this is this hatred which killed the father of our nation, the greatest Hindu of his time, Mahatma Gandhi. So we have to initiate the series of activities which draw from Gandhi, we draw from Swami Agnivesh, and which draw from United Nations Charter of Human Rights, by training some youth, boys and girls, in these particular values, so that these can be taken down further. Because violence is possible because of the silence of the large section of society. Violence is not taking place just because few people are armed. Violence is also taking place because majority of the people are silent. How to make this majority realize that their silence is against the values of their own religion? We have to make it realize how this silence is against their own interest and in the interest of the human society, which we have to build for the future. And this, Mazhar Bhai, is my answer, that we have to work hard in this direction in creating more and more activists who can take up this task through different arena. We can have differences, but we have commonality. And commonality is that we want peace, we want justice, and we want human rights of every section of society restored in a proper way. Thank you very much. And I'm honored to be in this August gathering. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ram Bhai. I think you are very stingy with time. You have finished 40 seconds before your time. We are very grateful to you. And I think your concept of peace centers is really very commendable, that, to give a comprehensive message. And I really loved this observation that few have arms, but majority of silence. I think in a nutshell, this summarizes the world we live in. And until and unless we revert this, I think we are all doomed. Thank you very much for this very powerful message. Now, Ram Bhai is, I think, a binary personality. He is a trained doctor, medical doctor, and an activist. Now, I would like to introduce you to a vehicle from the realm of quantum mechanics. I don't know how many of you are aware of the nuances of quantum mechanics, but there the light is conceived as both a particle and a wave. Some of you might think that this is inconceivable and absurd, but that is reality. And this reality in the form of a living and pulsating personality, I am going to present to you today. And that is Parvez Hoodbhoy, Dr. Parvez Hoodbhoy. He is a trained physicist with huge contribution to nuclear physics, but he's also an activist. I have not come across many physicists and activists, physicists who are also activists, but here in this case, he is there with us. And I think he is both a physicist and an activist par excellence. Thank you, and we are grateful to you, Parvez Bhai, for these contributions. And he has been a leading activist, in terms of protection of human rights, and he bravely challenged religious fanaticism and became a leading defender of democracy and the voice of the minorities and the oppressed, especially in Pakistan and of course in other parts of the world also. And like Mani, he has won many prizes, but at the same time, I think he has also paid a very heavy price for his courage and his conviction and his stance against the establishment. And that is a matter of great honor and courage for us, and he becomes a beacon for us to, guide us on how to take stands and be committed and be courageous. Thank you very much for being an example to all of us, Parvez Bhai. And now I present Dr. Parvez Hoodbhoy on religious orthodoxy and challenges for security of sects and minorities in Pakistan. Parvez Bhai.
Thank you, Mazhar Sahab. Thank you. It's an honor to be here and to be in a community which I feel is my very own. It's different, of course, in the sense that we all think differently about religion and about the societies around us, but we are bound in one thing, that we believe in a global society, in every person, independent of his place of birth, his religion, having the same rights and being free of oppression. So I feel I am among friends. I'm also very privileged to be the speaker following Ram Punyani. He is a man I've admired very much. I am not a spiritual person like he is, but it's the commonality of goals that really matters. So let me address the issue at hand, which is religious orthodoxy and how minorities and sects are faring in Pakistan. Now, it's a fact that non-Muslims, and they are Hindus, Christians, Parsis, and now included in them is the Ahmadi sect, which was earlier on Muslim but now has been thrown out. These are all persecuted to different degrees in Pakistan, both by the state and by the people, by the majority. Now, I will not try and substantiate this because giving examples would needlessly consume my 10 minutes. Look, it was a different Pakistan when I was growing up in Karachi, because in my neighborhood, there used to be lots of Christians, a few Hindus, many Parsis, and as kids, we would play in the streets together. And now all that is completely gone. So Pakistan has really, really changed. And a lot of the minorities, the non-Muslims, have fled Pakistan. So there's only just a fraction of the Hindus that used to live in Sindh who are continuing to live over there. Now, this persecution is kind of puzzling because their numbers are small and getting smaller. So they have hardly any presence on the national scene. So they don't pose any kind of threat to the state. They're not taking up jobs. They're not trying to affect the cultural scene as in Europe. They are a very subdued minority. And so it's really an intellectually puzzling question. Why is it that they are so heavily persecuted? And one sees the instruments of oppression, of persecution being used in the form of the blasphemy law. So there's a law in Pakistan that is the infamous 295C, under which if you are accused of disrespect to the Prophet, to his companions, to the Quran, then the minimum penalty for that, if you are convicted, is death. So it's an instrument that's frequently used upon the minorities, and of course, people have lost their lives protesting it. The governor of Punjab, Salman Taseer, was killed for merely wanting some kind of a minimal reform in that. So now the question is, why is the Pakistani state so committed to looking away from the persecution of minorities and in fact participating in it through the promulgation of laws such as this? And if one looks at the Constitution of Pakistan, then it explicitly gives Muslims a higher state as compared to non-Muslims. So to me, the answer is that the Pakistani state is determined to project and promote itself as an ideological state that is based upon Islam and in which all rights should flow from Islam itself. So in other words, this is a country that wants to, now let me correct what I said. This is a country whose establishment, whose military and political establishment would like to lay the foundations on religion alone. Well, let's accept the fact that Pakistan was created by appealing to the majority, to the Muslim majority, and that Mr. Jinnah was very successful in raising fears. What he promised, we don't really know because he didn't lay out a different plan for Pakistan. But then there's the question, suppose that this is a society that bases itself on Islam, can that society be pluralistic? Now, that's a very important question today, but it's a complex question. And in the few minutes I have left, I will not be able to give you a definite answer. All I will say is that, yes, Islam can be pluralistic. And in fact, there are episodes of history, particularly if one goes back to several hundred years in Spain, where different peoples, Jews, Christians, and Muslims, had happened to live together peacefully. And we could even say that during the Mughal Empire, there was peaceful coexistence under Akbar and so forth. So there are episodes of history where Muslims have lived perfectly at peace. Well, I should say more or less perfectly, because nothing is perfect in the world. And so the answer is yes, Islam can be consistent with pluralism. And on the other hand, if one looks at it textually, if one looks at things literally, well, then there are clearly passages in the Quran that go against pluralism. So it's a question of take your pick over there. And in the present circumstances, given the kind of government we have, that of earlier on Ziaul Haq and now of Imran Khan, who is an ideologue, who is committed to what he calls the Riyasat-e-Madina, the idealized Islamic state. In that kind of ideological straitjacket, one finds that pluralism then becomes a distant dream. So I'm being very practical at this point. I want to raise the question for myself and for others. What is it that can be done to protect Pakistan's embattled peoples? And I would say that the worst one, the ones who have been affected the most, are the Ahmadis, number one. I mean, they can't even get buried. Their graveyards are set upon, the gravestones broken. They can be put in jail for attempting to read the Quran. They cannot call their places of worship mosques because that's illegal. They cannot say the kalma. Saying the kalma will get them into jail and so forth. So they are, I think, the worst affected. But then in Sindh, where there is a substantial minority of Hindus, one sees that there is case after case of young Hindu girls being abducted and then forced to change to Islam. And the government looks on this, does nothing, and in fact, has made it impossible to pass a law against that. So, and I could talk about Christians as well, having taught at a Christian college in Lahore until very recently, until they fired me. I can say that that Christians in Pakistan have a pretty rough deal, to the point that many of them don't feel comfortable having names like Paul or Peter or David or John, and they've now opted for Muslim sounding names. So it is a horrific, horrendous situation for minorities, and it's getting worse under the ideological government of Imran Khan, particularly when it comes to education. Now, kids, well, earlier on, it was to a degree, but now even more, kids will have to now read about Islamic heroes, about Islamic teachings, not in their religion classes, but in every class, in English, in Urdu, in geography. You just can't get away from it. And so Pakistani minorities have a very, very tough time. They're quiet because they're afraid that if they speak up, they will become targets of persecution even more. So now the question is, what can be done to protect them? And I'll be very frank with you. I think that it's extremely important for the journalists in this country, for the news media, to keep reporting whatever happens to them. And a lot keeps happening over there. One should not stay silent on this. One should let the truth be told, and the truth not just be told, but the truth be broadcast, because broadcasting it to an international audience makes a difference, makes a big, big difference. I can give you proof after proof. But first, just look at Afghanistan. Afghanistan, even the Taliban now know that because they're dependent upon the external world for aid and know that the country will starve, therefore they want to give a soft impression. Therefore, they want to give an impression that they are not persecuting the Hazaras as they did earlier, or the Shias, or the Tajiks. Now, whether they actually stick to their word and whether the leadership has control on that or not, I don't know. But what I can say is that in the case of Pakistan, because
30 seconds more.
Yeah, because of external pressure, because of the fact that things get out into the international media, this is what stopped the jihadist mechanism within Pakistan. The use of FATF has been extremely successful. So I'll end over here saying that that is very important for our journalists to do, but for ordinary people like me, activists across the country, we just need to fight harder for a Pakistan that gives justice to its citizens, and particularly to those who don't belong to the mainstream Muslim majority. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Parvez Bhai, for yet another very courageous and a very frank presentation, and it has really opened our eyes. What really impressed me is talk about your intellectually puzzling what is happening in Pakistan, indeed, and also that there is no room for any silence, that we have to broadcast, and the onus you have put on journalists and the media, I think it applies all over the world, including in India and many other places. I am reminded, in Goa, we had done one study about 15 years back on history, of 1,000 years of inter-community relations in the Deccan. 1,000 years inter-community relations in the Deccan, where it was mostly Muslim rule. And what we found, that there were both periods where there was communal harmony, and also periods where the establishment, the rulers, had discriminated against the non-ruling community, which was majority community in this part, the Hindus and others. And what comes out very starkly is wherever there was harmonious relations, there was prosperity. And wherever there was discrimination, the society suffered. So I think it's a huge, big lesson for all of us, and I think it applies even today. So thank you very much. At this point, I would like to recognize some of the people who are here with us today. O.P. Shah Sahab, he's really dedicated himself to peace, and especially he's from Calcutta and peace in Kashmir. And Farhatullah Babar Sahab from Pakistan, Member of Parliament, former. Irfan Mufti Sahab, again from Pakistan, and Shirma Kirmani from Pakistan. And now I would like to go over to our next speaker, that is neighbor of Pakistan, Ms. Sahar Sabah. See, I think Afghanistan has become the flavor of the season for all the wrong reasons now. All our sympathies with the people of Afghanistan, of this country, undergoing acute suffering for 4 decades and becoming worse by the day. I think we have with us Ms. Sahar Sabah, who's most eminently qualified to give us a peek into the wounded soul of Afghanistan. And she is a women's rights activist from Afghanistan who has worked for many years in refugee camps in Afghanistan and Pakistan. Her area of expertise are education, human rights, advocacy, and communication. Currently, she is studying at Luleå Technical University in Sweden, and will be addressing us on religion, state, and human rights in Afghanistan, lessons for the region. Sahar Sabah, all yours.
Thank you so much for this opportunity, and I would like to thank COPA Peace Network for facilitating this, and it's an honor to be with such distinguished and honorable panelists. It is hard to talk about Afghanistan in just 10 minutes, but I will try. And when we talk about religion, so unfortunately our experience is quite different in Afghanistan, at least in the last 40 years, 30 years. And the reason is that what was imposed on us in the name of religion. But I also would like to say from the beginning that when talking about religion, in this case, Islam, there is a difference between Islam as a faith in majority of people in Afghanistan, and Islam is a political tool or is a political project, so which we call in Afghanistan Islamic fundamentalism. So this is very important for us, and both of them needs a separate and long and detailed discussions. Islamic fundamentalism, and our experiences in Afghanistan has shown that said, it's a project, it's a political project, very violent, very brutal, which was created for the interests of others, for the interest of mainly Western powers. So it's very important to know that when it comes to Afghanistan in the Islamic fundamentalist history, which is again a long discussion, to know that Islamic fundamentalism has been imposed on Afghanistan. It is an imported project, and in the last 40 years, started in 1970s and up to the creation of many of Mujahideen, as you may know, are the jihadi parties, both in Pakistan and also in Iran, with a very big support, both political, military, and also financial support of the Western countries, most importantly, America. So these parties were, in fact, created and thrown on Afghan people. And I don't want to go into details about that, but it's just to remind ourselves that it has a history behind. How this fundamentalist domination has really led to the miseries and the violation of human rights, and most importantly, women's rights. Also, I don't think we have the time or need to go into details. But what's important is that Afghanistan, unfortunately, is a great example, is a very obvious example of when religion used as a political tool, and when religion used as a political project, what can it do to the people and to the country? And we see Afghanistan and its people have gone through unbelievable miseries in the name of religion and because of the fundamentalists' dominations. So the consequences, when we talk about that, it's not just about the women's rights. It's one part of the tragedy. It's about the whole nation. It's about a country with more than 35 million people who have been hostage, have been taken hostage in the hands of these fundamentalists, from the jihadist groups to the Taliban, and once before and now again. And this is really important for us. What can we do? What is the solution? And I would limit myself just to the Afghanistan case, and or what lessons we have learned. The lessons we have learned that the fundamentalists are anti-human, misogynist forces that cannot and will not do anything for the betterment, for the development, for the progress, for the promotion or protection of human rights. And this, the history of Afghanistan has shown this very well. So therefore, we want that there shouldn't be any support in whatever name, in whatever form, to such forces, whether it is the Taliban or the jihadi groups or any other such groups, because that will be used against the people of Afghanistan. The other thing which is very important for us right now is that we want the world to know that forces, religious extremist forces such as Taliban, are not welcome by the people. They don't have any base in Afghanistan. And that's why it's very important not to be deceived by what the Taliban say, or not the image that is given by the Western media, only because to put the blame on Afghan people, only because to see Afghanistan and its people from their Orientalist perspective. So this has to be changed. The people of Afghanistan, the women, the children, like any other country in the world, they want to live in peace. They don't want war. They want to live in, to have access to all the basic rights human beings need and deserve to have. So this is really important for us to not conceal the responsibility, the accountability that many of these Western countries and countries in the region should take be behind this Orientalist view. The third point, what we understand and what is very important is that these fundamentalists can be defeated. It's not that nothing can be done against them, but it's also important to know that they cannot be defeated, as history has shown, as the last 20 years, at least in Afghanistan, has shown that no foreign interventions, occupations, or support, or even humanitarian projects can defeat such fundamentalist forces. So only solidarity, only hearing Afghan people, only, as before also said, establishing peace centers and raising awareness and talking about what is happening and listening to the people. So this is really important, especially now that the humanitarian crisis happens in Afghanistan. Millions and millions of people are in danger of starvation, and the winter is coming, and there will be a very big human tragedy. So it's the responsibility of all those countries who brought Afghanistan to this point, including the countries in the region, to change the situation, to open their borders, to welcome Afghan people, to give them opportunities to really help themselves. And this is really very important. And the last point I want to say just quickly is that we also learned the hard way that peace without justice is not possible. Injustice for us in Afghanistan means that to bring all from the 1979 up till now, both the internal forces and external, who are responsible for the miseries, the destruction, the brutalities, the violation of human rights, and whatever has happened in Afghanistan, to international court of law. They should be taken responsible. They should pay for what they have done to Afghanistan and its people. And I really hope that people who are listening now, they will really take interest in these issues, and Afghan people should not be led to feel that they are abandoned, that they are left alone. And this will be really a betrayal to Afghanistan and its people, and not only to them, but to everyone around Afghanistan in the world, because we, as Professor Hudbai also pointed out, that Pakistan, where I also have lived, is a different country now after 30 years. And one reason is also the brutal, the very devastating impact of the fundamentalist domination in Afghanistan in whatever name. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sahar Sabah. I think I feel very happy that we have at least one clone of Dr. Ram Punyani. You have also proved to be stingy with time and finished much before your time. Thank you very much for sticking to this. And really very good presentation. And I think there are two very big takeaways from your presentation. Of course, there are many points. That is, one is fundamentalists are always anti-human, and I think it applies all over the globe. And second is that no foreign forces can defeat the fundamentalists. So very true. We have to understand how from within our societies we can defeat the fundamentalist forces, which seem to be going all over the world in different countries. Now, I would like to take this opportunity to make a presentation for our participants here who are who are there. And one PPT we would like to show about how they can contribute through questions to the panel. Please, PPT. Before I request my colleague Roshan to speak and explain about this PPT, just I'd like to make 2 points here. One is some participants have been sending us messages saying that they are not visible and they cannot speak. This particular webinar has been designed in such a manner that only the panelists are visible and only the panelists can speak. Unfortunately, for a variety of reasons, we have disabled both the audio and the video of the participants. However, they can put questions to any of the speakers through a mechanism which is going to be explained to you by my colleague Roshan through this PPT. Please have a look and please try to put in as many questions as possible, but each one can put in only one question and not more than one. Each participant can put in one question and not more than one. So let's proceed.
A very good evening to our participants. Here are the guidelines for you. Please make sure your computer or phone audio is turned on to listen to the speakers. Your mic and video are automatically disabled and it will be throughout the webinar. There is a Q&A option. It's an icon available at the lower taskbar of your Zoom application, available for our participants. Please click on the Q&A icon to ask a question to any panelist. Only one question per participant is allowed. So please make sure to type in your best question and make it brief. Only 15 to 20 questions that are crisp and raise important issues will be taken up. You may also share comments or suggestions. It is proposed to produce a report of the webinar and some comments and questions can be included. You can exit from the webinar and re-enter if you're facing any internet or technical issues. This is the performer for asking questions. Please remember to follow it. I request all the participants to either take a note of this or please take a screenshot of the screen which is visible to you. The performer for asking questions to all our panelists is the same. First is question 2. Please mention the panelist name to whom you are addressing the question. Next, from your name, your town or city or country. And next, the question. Please make sure that the question is very crisp and brief. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Roshan. Now we come back after Afghanistan. Actually, I think along with Afghanistan, Sri Lanka is another country of South Asia that has suffered very bloody civil war that caused untold miseries to millions and devastated the beautiful island nation. Even India suffered a body blow with the assassination of our Prime Minister, Mr. Rajiv Gandhi, because of this conflict in our neighbor, Sri Lanka. We have with us Dr. Saravanna Muthu, who will enlighten us about the key causes of the conflict, the cost it extracted, and the long-term consequences being suffered by the people today. I think even today a lot of people are suffering, and there are so many refugees in Tamil Nadu who have been products of this conflict, civil conflict in Sri Lanka. And then we also request him to flag some key practices that people in other countries should adopt to avoid such devastation. because it was in Sri Lanka earlier. It can be in so many other South Asian countries tomorrow because the conditions are becoming ripe for that. Dr. Saravana Muthu has a doctorate from London School of Economics and is the founder and executive director of the Center for Policy Alternatives, CPA. He is a member of the Regional Advisory Committee of Amnesty International for Asia and was invited by President Obama to attend his high-level event on civil society in New York. Now I am requesting Dr. Saravana Muthu ji to make his presentation on religion and violence, costs, consequences for Sri Lanka. Dr. Saravana Muthu ji, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and thank you very much to the organizers for affording me the opportunity to take part in this discussion with a very distinguished fellow panelists. With regard to Sri Lanka, there are two issues here. One is that we have a majority Sinhala Buddhist population, which number over 70% of the overall population. We have roughly 10 and 10% with regard to the Muslim and Tamil populations in the country. So it's an overwhelmingly, predominantly Sinhala Buddhist country. And the predominant identity that is used in Sri Lankan politics is therefore one of Sinhala Buddhist. So it is the land, the nation, the state, the religion, all collapsed into one, into this notion of primacy. In 1978, for example, we came up with a new constitution which gave Buddhism the primary, Buddhism the primary place as far as religion was concerned, the foremost place. Although we deny that we are a theocracy, we gave Buddhism the foremost place. And in 1956, we came up with an official languages policy which made Sinhala, the language of the majority community, the official language of the country. It was not until the conflict, and indeed until the Indian intervention in 1987, whereby a peacekeeping force was stationed in Sri Lanka, that the constitution was amended to read that Tamil, and this is the English version of it, Tamil will also be an official language. Well, I won't go into the whole question of how the war proceeded, but what we do know is that in 2009, the military dimensions of the war against the Tamil Tigers concluded with the government of Sri Lanka winning a decisive victory. Prabhakaran, the guerrilla leader, was killed in the course of that battle. Now, the issue, therefore, was a question of, did we move into a post-war period where the guns merely fell silent, or did we really move into a post-conflict situation where the sources of conflict were not sustained, not reproduced? Did we really win the peace challenge that confronted all of us, government, civil society, indeed all of society? And unfortunately, what happened was that we didn't actually deal with the post-conflict situation, but rather we ended up in a situation where we produced new sources of conflict and sustained old ones. With one community, with one ethnic community, the Tamils now militarily defeated, the government of the day took their triumphalism and focused it on the Muslim community. The regime that won the war against the Tigers was, of course, the regime of President Mahinda Rajapaksa, who is currently Prime Minister and who is the brother of the present president. The triumphalism that came about led to a gradual focusing, targeting on the Muslim community now as the other. The president's brother at that stage is now the current president. The president's brother at that stage was the defense secretary, was known to have encouraged extremist Buddhist forces, like one called the Bodhu Bala Sena, which has a lot of links with Venerable Viratu in Burma, the 969 movement. And they targeted them in terms of attacking their businesses and spreading this terrible hate campaign against the community that they were targeting the Sinhalese and going to turn Sri Lanka from a predominantly Sinhala country into a Muslim one. The propaganda campaign was particularly vicious and at one level absurd, insofar as it conformed very much to the Goebbelsian notion that, you tell a lie often enough, it becomes fact, or it becomes treated as fact. And the bigger the lie, the better. And so the argument was that Muslim businessmen, indeed, they are very much involved in the retail trade, were putting various substances on the goods that they were selling to make Sinhala women sterile, that they couldn't have children, that at Muslim restaurants, Muslim waiters would spit into your food, and all sorts of ridiculous accusations. And so we had violence. We had attacks on mosques. We had attacks on businesses. And it's also interesting that a fair number of the attacks have been focused on businesses rather than anything else, suggesting that having turned on the Tamil community, now the Sinhala community wanted to take their revenge, as it were, or avenge themselves on the Muslim community in order to get control of the sources of economic power. Yeah. Now, this continued and it reached its sort of climax when, on Easter Sunday in 2019, allegedly extremist Islamic groups launched the terror attacks against Christian churches and hotels, resulting in a massacre of some 200 and over 250 people on that one Easter Sunday. And therefore, the anti-Islamic sentiments in the majority community, although they did not attack Buddhists, the attack was not against Buddhists, the anti-Islamic sentiments in society increased. And they increased in terms of talking about the madrasas, the need for governmental control of the madrasas, the need for control over particular practices in the Muslim community with regard to polygamy and all of those more personal and social and cultural practices. And then, of course, this notion of wearing the burqa, that it was a security threat and that it had to be banned. And this has now continued into the COVID pandemic, where once again, action was instigated in violation, in defiance, in neglect of all international evidence and expert opinion. And people who died of COVID, they were all supposed to be cremated. This, of course, struck at the very heart of Muslim beliefs with regard to the rituals of the dead. And this went on for quite some time, despite, as I said, the international opinion, the domestic opinion, of the medical experts and all of that. And ultimately, when Sri Lanka came up for scrutiny at the United Nations Human Rights Council in Geneva, we needed friends. And Imran Khan, the Prime Minister of Pakistan, visited Sri Lanka just before the UN sessions. And it is commonly believed that his intervention led to the Sri Lankan government lifting the ban on the burial of people who died as a consequence of COVID. Now, what all of this says is that we have at the present moment a government that is authoritarian, it's militaristic, and it has an ideology of Sinhala Buddhism. That is the majoritarian streak. And as I said, that is the dominant identity. How does one combat that? I suppose the only way that one can combat that is by using social media and other forms of media to say that a lot of these things that have been said and done in respect of minorities is divisive. It is destructive of the country as a whole, and that it is also, and I think this is important in terms of the political dimension, fundamentally anti-Buddhist. It has got nothing to do with the teachings and practices of Buddhism as preached by the Lord Buddha. It is in effect, therefore, a political fight which involves civil society, and yes, it will involve social media. And in addition to that, I think because Sri Lanka has this particular problem of being under scrutiny at the United Nations Human Rights Council, it requires that continued pressure is placed upon Sri Lanka to recognize that for a large part of its independent history, whilst this notion was being challenged, this notion still had some residual impact, that Sri Lanka was a country based in constitutional and political terms on the notion of unity in diversity. That it was made up of many people.
Dr. Saravanamuthuji, 30 seconds, please. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. That it was made up of many peoples, each who had their different customs and practices, but nevertheless, they all wanted to be, yes, different, but yet the same in terms of a common Sri Lankan identity. So I think that is the challenge that we in Sri Lanka face in terms of pluralism. What we have to do, I mean, we have the words of the Israeli philosopher talking about decent societies and civilized societies, Avishai Margaret, where he says that, look, we must try to strive for a society in which institutions do not humiliate citizens and citizens do not humiliate each other. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Really appreciate your presentation. One thing which comes out clearly is that the state and the majority communities always need an enemy. Somehow, if there is no enemy, they end up creating an enemy. And I think it is very unfortunate. Now, I would, at this point, we also have discussants. So at this point, 3 discussants are there. So I would like to invite Ms. Jill Carl Harris, who's one of the discussants, to respond to the discussion so far. Jill Ban is an associate of P.V. Rajgopalji. They are with Ekta Parishad, and they have been into mega events, huge, big imagination, and equally huge, big implementation. I have been fortunate to be part of some of their initiatives. And I once read about J.R.D. Tata, that he had the capacity to think mega big and to implement it even bigger. And that's why we have all the industries with the Tatas. I think Jill Ben and Raj Gopalji of Ekta Parishad are the Tatas of the civil society. Jill Ben, all yours.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me there, Mazhar? It's okay. You're
loud and clear. You're loud and clear.
Good.
Please go ahead.
I want to thank COVA Peace Network for taking this really important initiative, not only on the anniversary of Swami Agnavesh's birth, but also on this International Day of Peace. Clearly, religion is, as Swami would have said, was a vehicle for peaceful coexistence, and interreligious harmony was possible, but at the same time, he was the first to point out the problems of the fundamentalism that many of you have spoken about today. You know, I think particularly Parvez, you have made some extremely important points about minorities in Pakistan, as our friend Saravana Muthu has with Sinhalese Buddhists in Sri Lanka. And these are things that have also been pointed out in India by Ram Punani. I think that these kind of divisions that we see was so part of Swami's speak that he at every turn was trying to find how to bring people together and give respect to minority rights. You know, my own experience, and this was with regard to Ekta Parishad and some of the land-based land reform work that we did with landless people. I cannot forget how Swamiji used to touch people's hearts when he spoke, how he brought a kind of contagious joyfulness wherever he went. You know, part of the deep spirituality that Father Valsan Tampu has referred to, a deep joy, making people feel respected no matter where they were from and where they had come from. And I remember in many instances when he stood up and gave a direction to all of us within some of the land rights movements as to where we needed to go in bringing those few more inches of land to very poor Dalit communities or to landless poor communities, or when he helped Adivasis believe that they could hold on to the land resources that they had under their possession. This kind of empowerment is something that is very rare. You know, when you see the kind of way Swami acted his life, empowering bonded laborers, landless poor, and farmers, small farmers in his ashram in Haryana. This kind of inclusive spirituality, which really focused on seeing the poor in the center of his vision, the moral indignation that he had for injustice, and how he really responded to the pluralistic visions of the people he dealt with. I remember being with him in deep, remote indigenous areas, remote areas where Adivasis were living, and how he was able to support them in their rituals and practices, even though many of them had practiced a kind of syncretic religion. This is something that we have heard from all of the speakers today. I was so touched by Glenn Martin's reference to Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, universal family, because he was able to convey to the global community, not just religious communities or Indian communities, he was able to communicate this notion of universal family, a kind of cosmic consciousness that Father Tampu has referred to. In conclusion, I would like to say how much he influenced Rajgopal and Ekta Parishad and many of us to pursue the vision of a Jai Jagat, a campaign, a march to Geneva, which he found totally in line with what he wanted to do. He would have jumped out of his hospital bed to be walking with us through these many countries to bring a notion of peace with justice. This was his DNA. It's what made him live with such joy and such depth. And I think as we reflect back on all of your vantage points in different parts of South Asia, especially our Afghan friend Sabah, who has seen such misery of the fallout of the last 20 years of a Western invasion and the rise of such horrific fundamentalism. These are the things that Swamiji helped all of us to find ways to counteract, to create campaigns and visions for something alternative. And I just want to thank again all of you for making this a special day, this International Day of Peace, so special for all of us and for the panelists. COVA Peace Network is the center of bringing all these people together. We thank you all. Jai Jagat.
Thank you very much, Jilban, for this excellent presentation where you have really captured the spirit of Swamiji. And the best was your statement that poor were in the center of his vision. Nothing could have been said better. Thank you very much. We are grateful for this. I would like to say that we have with us speakers from all the 8 South Asian countries, and now we also have Mr. Kanak Mani Dixit. I have already identified earlier, and I am not able to see Mr. Karma. He was here, our friend from Bhutan. Yeah, Mr. Karma is here also. So welcome to all of you. And now we would move on to our next speaker from Bangladesh. Mr. Ghosal Manoranjan. He is a freedom fighter, singer, and Secretary General of Interfaith Harmony Society, Bangladesh. Now he has been exceptionally active in, he's a writer, he's a writer of 5 books, activist, singer, and he's been a freedom fighter who has fought actively for the freedom of Bangladesh. And we think that Bangladesh is becoming a phenomenon in itself. Bangladesh seems to be transforming into an amazing country. Its economy was always a matter of concern, but from a few years, religious extremism has taken a dangerous grip on society, and military was everywhere except in the barracks. But now we hear that the famous statement of mullahs in masjid and military in the barracks. Uh, we would like to know from Mr. Ghosal about how this was made possible and the impact it is having on the economy and the society. Mr. Ghosal, on resisting communism in Bangladesh and moving ahead. Please go ahead, sir. All yours.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Mazia, for inviting me in this auspicious occasion in the day of this peace, 21st September, and to commemorate the anniversary of the great Swamiji, who had a great vision to make peace. In fact, the discussion subject is peace, religion and peace. You know, what I personally understand, peace is the word that comes from religion. But very unfortunate, nowadays, religion has become threat to civilization. I'm not going to mention any name of any country. That is my habit. You will have to accept it or you may not accept it. Because I have fought against Pakistan. I have seen their rule. I have seen in my eyes they had shot me. They killed two of my brothers. So, discussing this day, I should not waste the value of peace and religion. It's better let us go how religion can be restored to be a valiant armament to establish peace in every country. Peace is a factor that creates human being to their humanity. But nowadays, religion has become enemy to humanity. Now we can talk between the lips. We can create peace stations every country. But that is not the solution to establish peace. It has to be started from class 1, first proposal. Because what religion is doing, we have noticed it, we are looking it, and we know what is happening in Pakistan, what is in Afghanistan, what is in the highest democratic country, India, for whose help the great lady of Mrs. Gandhi, we have become a sovereign country, Bangladesh, with our red and green flag. Now I must mention a very important word, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, the father of the nation of Bangladesh. He told, I planted a slab of secularism. If anybody tries to destroy it, there will be a dangerous situation of Bangladesh. And we have noticed it. And he told, I'm not going to tell all things. Everyone. What I'm going to do now, how is and the of Ognivesh, how in the world calm and
There seems to be some problem with the internet of Mr. Gosalji. So we'll wait for him to come back. But in the meantime, I think we should proceed to the next speaker. We will have him back again when he's. Huh? He's back. He's back. Gosalji, please go ahead. Please continue.
Yeah. So what we have seen, I am not going to mention that. Religion makes a man with civilization and a real human being with humanity. And Bangladesh, with 90% of Muslim population, with very meager minority, the second majority is Hindu, then Buddhist, then Christians. We have a problem, we have communalism, no doubt it. But constitution, we lost the secularism from the constitution. It has again been put our Prime Minister, Sheikh Hasina. I cannot say that we are in full democratic peace. We are with full religion, facilities, everything, but we are enjoying everything with democratic practice, religion, and peace. How it is possible? It is possible because our experience in 1971 was number one. Number two, we got a leader like Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, now his daughter Sheikh Hasina, the present Prime Minister, now in UN. And the best thing is that our cultural activists and human rights activists are very strong, no doubt about it. You all know that Pakistan banned Rabindra Sangeet, Tagore song, but we rehabilitated that. And there are many more things we degraded. Kissinger told us bottomless basket country. And Obama, the president, former president of United States of America, told in Kenya, his father's country, you don't need to make any planning. You just go and visit Bangladesh, see how Sheikh Hasina is doing. Now they tell Bangladesh is a role model country for the development. We have problems. We are not so rich people, but our per capita income, everything Dr. Mazhar already told, we are developing ourselves within our strength, like the strength of 1971 war, because we are with our cultural range, because you know, we established our mother's language, Bangla. Now it is followed by every international countries as International Mother's Language Day. So Bengali people can do many more things when they are united. And you will have to remember, when Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, in those days he was not Bangabandhu, I am talking about the election of 1970. He won 72% vote. 28% belong to his against, that is Muslim League, Nizami Islam, all these parties. And from 1975, 15th August to 1996, this 21 years, plus these 28% people have flourished. And during those days, some anti-liberation force people became ministers. So what happened? They appointed lot of people from their bloc, from their mind. But what we can do, what we did. We remember the spirit of our liberation war. That liberation war, that spirit is still maintaining within us. And now the problem is that madrasa and education system. Now my suggestion to my brotherly and friendly countries, of course I forgot South Asian countries, my respect to them, I have learned from them many things, and Dr. Mazhar organized this thing, and they have, he has organized and gave me an opportunity to learn from these genius speakers. What we will have to do now?
Thank you very much, sir. 30 seconds more, Ghosalji. 30 seconds more.
Yeah, we will have to make a new syllabus from class 1 to honors level. That God is one from the Bible, from Veda, Eko Brahma Dityo Nasti, from Islam, La illallah illallahu, and the essence of all religions, where we can unite. This should be clearly explained in those textbook, both from class 1 to honors level students. Then the new generation come with a force to establish peace, and religion is a tool of peace. They will establish, and then the dream of our great leader Bangabandhu, secularism, and the dream of the great Swamiji, Swami Agnivesh, will materialize, and we will have to carry on our discussion to make peace stations everywhere. Human rights activists, cultural activists.
Please conclude, sir. Please conclude, sir.
Well, I'm sorry. Thank you very much, Dr. Mazhar, and all the distinguished panelists and the Koba Peacemaker Organization. My namaskar, my adab, good evening, and shubha khair to all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Thanks a lot. And I think Bangladesh is certainly emerging as a lesson for all of us. The entire region, the transformation that it is going through, and the progress that it is showing. Another lesson perhaps which we can have for all the subcontinent comes from Nepal. Here we have Mr. Kanak Mani Dixit. He is the publisher, editor, and writer, and he's the founder of magazine Himal South Asian that inculcates and develops South Asian perspective in the region like no other. I find him to be a truly South Asian citizen like Kamla Bhasin of India and Karamat Ali of Pakistan. These three genuinely transcend national boundaries and should be the paragons for every citizen of the subcontinent. Despite the political turmoil in Nepal that seems to have become a constant one, with unique distinction is its constitution that provides for representation to all sections of society and parliament. Actually, I would like to say that I had the honor of participating in some consultations in Kathmandu when the constitution was being drafted, and I would like to hear more about it and its political and social impact on Nepal. Requesting Mr. Kanak Mani Dixit to enlighten us about Nepal, how Nepal ensured political representation for communities through constitutional reforms. Kanakji, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mazhar Bhai. As a non-believer myself, I take on this challenge of speaking about faiths and religion, respecting all religions, while myself being a non-believer. I believe that we must try and answer the question, the conundrum placed before us by from Islamabad by Parvez Woodboy, where he talked about this puzzle of the heavy persecution of small minorities by massive majorities. Why does this happen? why is there such lack of empathy from the majority when they are not actually threatened economically or socially or politically by minorities? This is an issue. If we can unpack this conundrum, I think we are halfway to finding a solution to today's theme as presented to us, which is religion and peace in South Asia. And I also believe that the answer, besides what the previous speaker from Dhaka spoke about the curriculum and education, I believe that is one correct path to take. The other is to, in a sense, cut iron with iron. Swami Agnivesh Ji was a man of the cloth, yet he held the values of empathy for all faiths. And I think that is the value that we need to spread. And how does one do it? And why is it so important that this topic, religion and peace in South Asia, needs to be at the forefront of our knowledge? One is that religion has been weaponized in many of our societies, and that weaponization needs to be fought by another weapon of peace. So religion should be utilized as a weapon of peace. And that can be done by the men and women of the cloth. So I would make this right at the beginning rather than come up with a conclusion towards the end. Let me just come up with a conclusion right off before I get into Nepal, which is, how does one multiply individuals such as Swami Agnivesh? Because religion, faith has an ability to go to the masses. And if you can spread a message to the masses, it is much better than what an academic or even an activist can do. So I believe that that is the road we should take. And I think somebody has his or her mic on. If that could be muted. The need for the requirement of peace of South Asia in South Asia is self-evident. South Asia has nearly a fourth of the world's population. So if we respect ourselves and if we understand how the coming together of nationalism and faith-based populism, how religion-laced nationalism has impacted us negatively.
Just 1 second, sir. Mr. Ghosal, can you please mute your mic? Mr. Ghosal, your mic is, please mute your mic. Thank you.
Yeah. So, as I was saying, we just need one of the biggest issues standing before us for a South Asian coming together so that there is social justice in each of our societies. One of the tools being used by the ultra-nationalists now is religion. And that is where we must pry apart the ultra-nationalist and religion, because then that becomes the most dangerous brew when you mix ultra-nationalism and you give it longevity and energy with negative energy with faith or religion. Now, as far as Nepal is concerned, thus far, we have been saved from the worst aspects of the weaponization of religion by politics, such as happened in Pakistan, in Sri Lanka, and we see and feel with such fear what is gaining ground in India. Thus far, Nepal, some might even say, is exemplary for its interfaith relations. I believe the situation is such for now that while there are many problems with religious sects and minorities in Nepal, it does not at this point come to the level of the othering that you find in other places. Nepal also has a new constitution, the newest constitution in South Asia, which in words carries a lot of the values of a society that is inclusive, including towards minorities of all kinds, including faith-based minorities. But there are also problems within the constitution. But there is more than that, there are problems in the implementation. Nevertheless, I'll go back to my point that thus far, Nepal has been saved the scourge of utilizing of religion by the politicians in the extreme way that they have done in Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and India, have done so in Bangladesh, which has pulled back a little bit from the brink, as we have heard from the previous speaker. As far as Nepal is concerned, in 2 minutes, I'll just give you a rundown of the religious situation, the situation with, in the case of religious communities, faith-based communities in Nepal. You have Hinduism, but Hinduism not as yet the kind of Ram-based Hinduism, which tends to sideline the Vaishnavites, many of the Vaishnavites, the Krishna Pranamis, or the Saivites. Even the Saivites have become Ram Bhakts in an extreme kind of way, as you can see in the Chief Minister of Uttar Pradesh as we speak. However, in Nepal, the original genius of Hindu Dharma in terms of multiple ways of practicing your faith, that remains as yet. And perhaps one reason that the politicized Hindutva of India has not crossed the open border into Nepal is that Nepal is also very much Shaivite. But then beyond that, you have the tantric practices and the beliefs and practices of the Tantra. Then you have Buddhism as a strong element in Nepali society, even among individuals who would consider themselves Hindu. Among and within Buddhism, there are also a lot of variety. In Nepal, the Buddhism that is practiced is Mahayana and Vajrayana. Vajrayana with its tantric elements, which then makes it also linked with Hindu Tantricism, and Mahayana, which is separate from the teachings of Theravada that you find in Sri Lanka, or mostly in Sri Lanka and Thailand and elsewhere. But then even beyond these Buddhistic panths, you've got Bon. Bon is what people consider to be the pre-Buddhistic faith of the Tibetan plateau and the Himalayan rimland. What I'm trying to suggest by giving these examples of many streams of faiths in Nepal is, as yet, firstly, there is not the Mahadwanda between these. There are some issues, and I will not undermine any of the issues that historically have made. For example, the persecution of Buddhists in Kathmandu Valley since the unification of Nepal. Likewise, many other issues that have played into schisms, but these schisms do not give us the larger picture. The larger picture is still one of syncretism in Nepal. Our challenge right now is to maintain that as the politics of religion enters the discourse and takes over the imagination, as identity, religious identity also becomes a political identity, and the politicization of society therefore progresses as it has in other parts of South Asia. That, I believe, is something we have to guard against. To go by numbers, Nepal is about 80% self-described Hindu in the census, 9% Buddhist, about 4.5% Muslim, about 3% Kirat, that is, would be a religion practiced or faith practiced in the eastern part of the country.
Sir, 30 seconds more, sir.
Already, then I will just have to, I thought I had a little more time than that. Let me then go cut out all of that and come to this point that the Constitution of Nepal refers to secularism, but then it qualifies that by saying secularism, and in footnote, something that does not undermine Sanatan Dharma. I will conclude by saying that there are issues in Nepal. For now, religion is not politicized, but there are attempts to mix. I'm almost done. There are attempts to bring in a Hindu kingship or a Hindu state into Nepal. And that is where we have to be careful that we do not get into this weaponization state. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Kanakji, and especially for flagging this issue of the danger of religious identity becoming political identity and weaponization of religions. I think this is a very, very big threat and a challenge. I think all over South Asia, there is this targeting of the minorities, which was also flagged by Parvez Bhai and with Saravana Muthuji. And I think all over South Asia, and I think maybe in other parts of the country, world also, there is this feeling that whenever that people are generally coming to believe that we have to have a monolithic society where no minorities are there, only people from one community are there. If that is the case, then it will become heaven on earth, no other people. But this particular presumption meets its lie when we go to Maldives. Maldives is 100% Muslim. And still, I think there is a growing problem within the same community people. We have here with us Mr. Azim Zahir, who is a research fellow at the Center for Muslim States and Societies at the University of Western Australia. And he is from Maldives. And we would like to request him to speak about religious fragmentation and emerging violence in Maldives. Dr. Azim Zahir, the floor is yours, or the cyberspace is yours.
Thank you. And let me begin by thanking Dr. Mazhar Hussain and his team for inviting me to speak in this very important webinar today. As Dr. Mazhar Hussain mentioned, the Maldives is very unique compared to other South Asian states in that Islam in its Sunni form has been the sole recognized religion in the country for over 800 years. This mono-religious nature is further consolidated in the Maldivian legal system. For example, the Religious Unity Act of 1994 recognizes all Maldivians as followers of the Shafi school of law within Sunni Islam. Hence, the Maldives is legally 100% Sunni Shafi country. Therefore, historically, there have been neither interreligious nor significant intra-religious tensions in the society. However, this is no longer the case. Intra-religious tensions, in particular, have increasingly become a major issue in the society. In this context, even violence has increasingly found its ugly face. So I would like to briefly look at three questions in how do we understand these tensions and acts of violence in the Maldives? What role, if any, does religion play in them? What has the state done to address these issues? Writing in the 1970s and early 1980s, two scholars, Clarence Maloney and Elizabeth Colton, pointed out that Islam in the Maldives was largely a practice. Clarence Maloney observes it was limited to, and I quote from him, washing, fasting, and praying. Elizabeth Colton suggested that religion was not even ostentatiously practiced in the Maldives. In other words, people did not talk, debate, or contest about Islam. Ordinary Maldivians took it for granted as part of their everyday life. However, slowly since the 1970s and increasingly in the new millennium, this has changed due to several factors. One obvious reason was globalization and its related cultural influences in the country. Another key factor was that increasing number of Maldivians who went to study abroad, both in the West and the Muslim world, including especially Pakistan and Saudi Arabia. Since especially 2004, with rapid political liberalization in the Maldives, new narratives and new religious currents have found greater space in the society. In this regard, on one hand, ideologies of universal human rights and democracy emerge as powerful antidotes to long-standing authoritarianism in the Maldives. But on the other hand, Salafi Islam has increasingly emerged as the dominant religious voice in the public sphere. While obviously Salafis want to maintain the official mono-religious status of the country, they also want to change how Islam is believed, practiced, and enforced in the Maldives. They deeply contest what they believe as Western secular ideas of fellow Maldivians. They characterize these Maldivians as secularist and even anti-Islamic or enemies of Islam. Yet the mainstream Salafis so far has acted within the existing political system. However, Salafism itself is not monolithic in the Maldives. Even within broader Salafi spectrum, there are disagreements and major tensions. On the far end of this spectrum, there are those who claim themselves to be the true Muslims, advocating violent means to bring change in the name of what they believe true Sharia. Some of them support groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS. At least 4 murders have been linked to those who subscribe to such violent ideas, although there has been little progress in terms of prosecution. There were 4 suspected terrorism-related attacks in the country in year 2020, including stabbings of 3 foreign nationals in the Maldives. In May this year, we saw by far the most serious terrorist attack targeting former president and current Speaker of the Parliament, Mohammad Nasheed. He narrowly survived in this bomb attack that took place in the capital's main street. According to official estimates, about 170 Maldivians, which include women and children, have traveled to Syria to join groups such as the so-called Islamic State. While these are the most concerning issues in the immediate context, in my view, the divisions in the mainstream religious landscape between Salafis and Salafis and between Salafi Muslims and non-Salafi Muslim Maldivians can be even more challenging in the long term. For the time being, these polarizations and divisions are characterized by mistrust, vilification, demonization, and hate speech towards one another. These divisions eat away social capital and intra-communal tolerance, undermining the civic culture which is required not just for a viable democracy in the Maldives, but also social cohesion for peaceful communities that the Maldives has long enjoyed. But it's crucial not to lay blame on religion as such for these issues. While religion-based narratives may legitimize violence and breaking away of social bonds, other factors such as social and political grievances and larger political, economic, structural factors also contribute to these issues. Sometimes Islamophobic and anti-religious bigotry by a few have also contributed to these tensions. Finally, exploitation of religion for partisan politics also aggravate these issues in the society, as some speakers have also pointed out in their respective countries, weaponization of religion for political purpose. So how has the government tried to address these issues in the Maldives? The Maldivian government has attempted to address these issues of violence through legal reform and awareness programs so far. It has recently, for example, come up with a comprehensive national action plan on preventing and countering extremism in the country. However, these limited efforts have so far not reached out to youth who are already aggrieved and attracted to ideologies that promise violent alternatives. However, on the issues of larger religion-related divisions, the government has so far done little even in trying to understand what is happening in the society. There's even less done in terms of systematic policies to address these polarizations and divisions in the larger society. So if these two broad sets of issues, namely violence and violent ideologies advocated by a few in the fringe, and ideologically based tensions and divisions in the larger society, if these two issues are not addressed with the seriousness they require, the Maldives could experience greater instability, if not outbreaks of violence as found in some other parts of South Asia. So thank you. Thank you with that.
Thank you very much, Dr. Azim. So you have really opened the eyes, I think, for all of us that, just being, having only one religion does not vaccinate us from violence. So It requires a lot more. We are happy to hear that the government is doing something and it's not enough. And you have rightly flagged the issue of youth, addressing youth also. I think maybe we have to learn from Maldives about what you do in the next few years to see how you are able to address this, so that in other countries also we can possibly understand. Now, as we had mentioned, we have got discussants also to respond to some of the presentations. I have with me the second discussant. First discussant we have already heard, Jill Carr-Harris, Dr. Jill Carr-Harris. Now we have got Peter Jacob from Pakistan. I met Peter Jacob first in 1994 in Delhi at a meeting of India-Pakistan Convention, Joint Convention. And I remember very well when we came out for some tea time or something, Peter was humming a dhun, a classical dhun. And I could recognize that. I don't know whether Peter remembers, but I could recognize then. I gave the name of the raga and I said, Indian classical. He looked at me and said, no, Pakistani classical. See, different levels, but reality is the same. And I must say, Peter, all his life, has been trying to fight against all these different levelings, trying to fight beyond borders, and he has dedicated himself to fight for rights of minorities, fight for democracy, fight for the excluded. I have the privilege of meeting him many times in Pakistan also and seeing his work and his organization. And I am privileged to invite him to make his presentation about the South Asian phenomena today, especially in the context of Pakistan. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mazhar Hussain, and thank you all the speakers who've contributed this evening to this conversation. It was such a rich contribution, I must say, and a tribute to Swamiji, that we continue this spirit and struggle in this context of South Asia for humanity, basically love and justice. I also had the privilege of meeting Swami Agnivesh in Lahore and several places in India, and I can tell how passionate he was about the emancipation of bonded labor. In '94, when he came to Pakistan, the struggle against bonded labor was very high. It was almost experiencing a climax, and he was very passionate. He wanted to talk to the bonded laborers and people freed from the brick kilns. And I could see that, there was no language barrier. I mean, he spoke and he could speak the language of the laborers. That was most amazing. And again, as Mr. Dixit has explained, that he was a man in cloth, in robe, and he sort of mixed his identity of humanity, activism, and religion together, which is also another classical debate, whether it is viable, it is political. But as long as he showed in his character that as long as one can defeat the temptation of assuming power, you can stay pure in your activism, and that is why create an example of yourself. So a very befitting tribute, I must say, and thank you to all the speakers. I would like to name them individually and thank them personally, but of course the time would not be on my side if I do that. Mainly, I think, the treatment of smaller faith identities in South Asia is also a question related to how a state chooses to relate to religion, basically. though state-religion relationship is something under discussion directly or indirectly. Well, as far as scientific studies, there are examples of, different outcomes. But in South Asia, we looked up to India, for instance, as a model of, keeping religion at a bay while treating all citizens equally. Well, and there are mixed results. And that's a question that somehow I was also struggling with in my LLM thesis back in 2013 and 14. And that is where I got to study how the relationship of minorities or treatment of minorities was complexed and was to be studied in 3 countries, at least having different models of state and religion relationship. So I picked Bangladesh, India, and Pakistan, and as friends have spoken already about all 3 countries, I was able to notice that the social hostilities, the kind of hostilities which I believe many a times are manufactured everywhere, had some relationship with the state-imposed restrictions. Particularly in Pakistan, you could see this hypothesis being practiced. But one was amazed to look at why was the similar hostilities or the typology of hostilities that existed against minority religions or minority communities was almost same, and Bangladesh also. I mean, I must also underline that, you see, at that time in 2012, Bangladesh was still struggling to adapt to a different model or introducing reforms. And it actually occurred later that Bangladesh was, choose a path closer to what we call a secular democracy. And the results have started changing since then. So, but you see, somehow at that time, at least, the type of not only hostilities against the minority groups, but also the state response was somehow similar. So whenever an attack takes place on place of worship and its minority religion, the state institutions would move swiftly for rehabilitation efforts and offering compensations and similar things. And the use of the concept of religious insult was also somehow seen present with different intensity, of course, in different places. But somehow the type was similar. So one was perplexed and was, in fact, struggling with the question, why was
30 seconds more. 30 seconds, please.
Thank you, Mazhar. So why was this? So I think this is something which can help us lead to how the societies experience such violence, and Afghanistan is is a place to again focus and be worried about. I think politically, finally, politically speaking, if we do not have a strong SAARC, and we know why it is not so strong, and we need a people's voice to make SAARC strong, if we do not have legal frameworks supporting the kind of values that we would like to see in 21st century states, modern state, we will have to face a long route, perhaps, of social revival. And that is my prescription for South Asian countries, to strengthen SAARC and its values and its legal framework to overcome this situation. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much for this very succinct presentation where you were able to cover so many times about issues. And the best was, where you were talking about the social, the manufactured social
hostility.
Hostility. Yes. So I think it is becoming a phenomena, regular phenomena. Thank you very much. And now we come to I think the most beautiful country in the world. I had the opportunity of traveling so many places, but never came across something like Bhutan. And 70% forest cover, and the people are just at the happiest in the world. Now, we would like to know from our friend Dr. Lopen Karma about how you managed to do it. He is a thought leader, spiritual leader, and also president of Loden Foundation. Dr. Karma, please tell us how to go about. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mazhar Hussain, and happy International Day of Peace to all the participants. Greetings from Thimphu. I hope you are in a very peaceful state of the mind. Here we talk a lot about the state of the mind and how we should begin anything we do with the right intention. So I hope you are all in a very wonderful, peaceful state of the mind. And it's a great honor for me to take part in this event organized by GOVA. And particularly because I have had the opportunity to sit down and have a long conversation last year for an event that I organized called Bhutan Dialogues with him, talking about the topics that both of us cherish a great deal. Here in Bhutan, thank you, Mazhar, for describing it as the most beautiful country. We hope we will get there. We are nearly there, I think, in terms of our environmental efforts. We hope we'll also get there in terms of other areas, economy, society, culture, religion, etc. We are predominantly a Buddhist country with almost 80% Buddhist, and then some 20% Hindus, and then a sort of a growing number of Christians. The state religion here is Buddhism, and we have two specific Buddhist traditions from the wide range of Tibetan Buddhist traditions, the two sects called the Kagyu and Nyingma, which are doctrinally, philosophically, practically very, very close. So not much religious sort of differences here. But then that's not to say that we don't have any discrimination and problems here. We have had our share of gender discrimination, racial discrimination, quite a lot of issues that came out of ethnic differences. So I think it's important sometimes to separate the ethnic issues from the religious issues and also from the political issues and other issues. So talking about religion and peace particularly, I think one of the problems that we have, and I will read out something that Swami Agnivesh wrote in his book, Applied Spirituality. He said, it's our spiritual duty to seek. And to seek is to go beyond familiar stereotypes. To seek is, in effect, to be subversive of the status quo. Seeking is the strategy for liberation. Now, what is status quo? If you look around, I think Bhutan, other parts of South Asia, the status quo with the masses is really, will live in a great deal of ignorance. There is this idea that our system is better and superior than the others, that our system is the authentic right tradition. So I think a lot of religious fundamentalism comes from this idea of one system being the most superior and the most authentic. There is that kind of insularity, that kind of sort of not knowing the actual objective reality, but assuming wants to be the best and the most important. And that's sort of religious belief, dristi, the view of one's superiority, seem to lead to all kinds of problems, especially fundamentalism. And so what we really think we should do, perhaps through gatherings like this and in all the other interfaith dialogues and forums, to live up to the vision of Swamiji would be to educate people, to overcome that ignorance, to overcome that insular thinking, that very biased mindset. And I think if we really educate ourselves well enough, there's enough sort of similarity, and not just similarity, there's oneness. That if you look at the empirical level, we are all people seeking happiness, not wanting suffering. We are all totally equal and one in that sense. If you look at the ontological level, really seeking the real truth, the way things are, whether it's Allah or God or a Nasti, Brahman, Atman, or Buddha nature that I study and talk about these days, it's actually one truth described in slightly different ways and in different languages. So I think the answer to religious fundamentalism, to the way to make religion an instrument of peace, lies in education, as Swami Agnivesh has believed. And I think that education first must come from exposure, is what I believe. Looking at my own life, I've had a very ecumenical training in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, but I went beyond to get some Theravada training, some Zen training, and then also read other spiritual traditions. The Bible and the Quran sits on my bookshelf here. I think what we really need is more of such exposure among the citizens, more dialogues, and not just dialogues of words, as Swamiji said, but dialogues of deeds as well. Then one thing that I find, and this is one area where I'm actively involved as a Buddhist teacher and author, we need to reappropriate the religious values. Because as Swamiji said, any institution sort of becomes stagnated at a certain point of time. They have to evolve with time to remain effective. And if you look at our spiritual traditions, a lot of them have become stagnated. They've become too ritualistic. They've become too dogmatic, too bigoted. So what we need is to go back to the original message of the founders and bring those timeless wisdom and values and make them relevant to the contemporary 21st century. And only religious figures can effectively do that. So earlier, I think there was mention of how we need to cut metal with metal. Perhaps religious fundamentalism and bigotry should also be effectively overcome by using religious teachings, especially make more liberal, more ecumenical and tolerant religious teachers go out to teach the fundamental values that are shared by all traditions, rather than talk only about the rituals and the practices and the customs, the cultural baggage that comes with the religious teachings. So that's what I often do here. I try to reappropriate and reformulate the Buddhist teachings to make it relevant to the 21st century. And through that, of course, not only overcome religious bigotry, sometimes there are religious teachings being used for political ends, social ends, cultural ends, economic benefit. We need to undo a lot of such abuse of religious teachings. I think this is something that the religious teachers, especially the ones who are progressive and liberal, ought to take up as a very important responsibility today to overcome fundamentalism. I think when we talk about cultures, of course, it's good to have a very universal, secular, open culture. But I think everybody needs a culture to have a very strong sort of state of mind. So even if we drop all the bigoted, the discriminatory religious cultures, in the end, if you don't have an open-minded, pluralistic, mutually respectful sort of cultural system in place, even secularism leads to the same kind of bigotry and hatred, and will be an instrument to destroy peace. And we can see that example in the case of the US. The difference that Republicans and Democrats have is to the extent of fanaticism, just like religious fundamentalism. So I think what we really have to do is cultivate culture that's appropriate. We need to appreciate the diversity of cultures and then promote cultures that are more respectful. And I believe that we can do, as I said earlier, through education. So to begin in our own
30 seconds, please, to conclude.
So my final message, I think in our own circles, in our own families, in our own societies, if there's something we can do to promote Swami Agnivesh's vision, would be to encourage our people to read scriptures of other religious traditions, to visit sites of other religious traditions, to make friends with people from other religious traditions. Try to sort of develop that openness. And through that, maybe we will be taking the first step to what Swami wanted, a Vasudeva Kudumbakam, a universal sort of one family. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So many profound messages, but I think the best came in the last. That is, encourage to read scriptures of other religions and traditions. I think if we can do that, if all of us can do that, the problem is solved. Thank you very much, Dr. Karma. Really grateful and appreciate. Now, I would like to request, seek permission from the audience. Normally, we have this tradition of trying to finish the meetings in time also. Now it's 8:31. We had proposed that we'll finish at 8:30, but still there are 3 speakers remain and question and answers. Maybe we'll need about 20 seconds more. I'll seek the permission of the House to proceed for another 20-25 minutes. And I hope you will bear with us. It's been a very wonderful, very enlightening session. And I really appreciate all the speakers and all the participants. Now, I would like to request Comrade Nalini Ratna Raja. She is a human rights activist, feminist, and core committee member of SAPE from Sri Lanka. She is a discussant. She's got a PowerPoint, and I would request her to please proceed. And Nalini, please tell us when to change the slide. You are doing it. That's good.
Hello, good evening, everybody, and good morning to some of you. Thank you so much for COVA Peace Network for giving me this opportunity. I know all of us are tired. We have this Zoom fatigue now. So I'll be very brief talking about the South Asian region, peace in South Asia. So all of you elaborated and explained how our state and religion and peace and militarizations, each country is happening. So I'm going to bring the very important piece to see the view from one aspect. When we come to talk about peace in South Asia, we need to look into one aspect which is very important. So before going to that, I just want to share these pictures with you. You can see the first picture, the 2020 February, Taliban and USA had a discussion in Doha. The Doha agreement, we know. We can hardly see any women there. And second picture is 2004 peace discussion in Geneva between Sri Lankan government and LTT. There also you can see 2 women. Just for peace talk or discussion, there's 2 women. These women are just for tokenism. They just taking them. This is important. I'm going to talk. We are talking about South Asian the peace in the region, but how to achieve peace without women participation. That's my point I want to raise here. Let's see. The USA and Taliban peace talk in Doha, 12 members delegation, only 1 were women in those discussions. But she says her voice was not heard. The same thing with 2004. 1 woman from Sri Lankan state, representing the Sri Lankan state, and 1 woman was from LTT side. They were like token because the women, especially the both case, you can see clearly indicates that neither government or nor the international community take the issue of women's inclusion seriously, causing huge concern for women about the futures and any peace with Taliban, same with Sri Lanka. So women voice need to be heard. Why? The extreme groups are in each and every instant. Their advance has been coupled with attack on the right of their own women and girls. A good experience what's happening in Afghanistan today. So they immediately attack their own women. How? Education is hindered, health, and decision-making. Now Taliban is telling women, we don't want women for decision-making tables. First attack. Second, we can see this women group. It can be Afghanistan women group or Sri Lankan women group in between this extremist group as well as between the state. For an example, unique example I can bring from Sri Lanka, as my one of the colleagues Saravana Muthu spoke already about how the Buddhist extremism attacking on Muslims. When Muslim women are targeted by Buddhist extremists or state or bringing policies or law for wearing burqa, they are telling not to wear burqa. Same time, the same women are attacked by Islamic extremists for not wearing burqa. This is a women case. We are in the middle. It's very difficult. We have to fight with our own religion, own extremist group, as well as by the extremist group from the state or the other religion. This is in all countries. It's applicable to Afghanistan or Pakistan. It's the same. We have to fight because we are in the middle. What is the role of women? We can see Afghan women for decades. They advocate for peace. Now all has gone waste. Sri Lankan women are still working on peace, working in very dangerous context where extremists, and on the other hand, their chances to deliver their voice is shrinking. In Afghanistan, I would say zero. Women are economically deprived by all these extremists. Why these mostly males are joining the extremist group or armed group? Their families, it can be wife, mother, the children, because as South Asian, males are the breadwinners of the family. When they leave, and women are economically deprived. And this is, they are destroying their own social fabric and structure. Women are not only victims. We can see many examples from April attack, and they have involved with the groups engaged in violence extremism. The role vary according to each group, can include conducting suicide bombing. Sri Lanka is
30 seconds more if you don't.
Okay. So they are also contributing. They are also being sympathizers, with the extremist group, and they are part of it. I would say that. Way forward, what we can do. Gender responsive approach is a must to address in the different needs and experience of women. Women should be involved in all decision-making process. CSO group, Peace Network, and government and international community should take the issue of women inclusively seriously. Conclusion, women can play a significant role in building sustainable peace and social harmony and justice in the region. Without meaningful participation of women in peace process, South Asia will never ever experience sustainable peace or harmony or justice. Women need commitment and action to ensure their participation and the continued protection of the human rights in inclusive South Asia. I would bring one point here quickly. The USA bringing the Taliban to the table for peace talk, but they didn't insist them to bring women to represent Taliban. Why? USA is going and doing a project in all the countries and funding hugely, doing women participation in politics and women in decision making, women empowerment. But when they are doing the peace talk like that, they don't, insist the other parties to bring their women, and the women voice need to be heard. So this is a hypocrisy, I would say, USA doing it. They are doing one thing and they are doing the other things. Some in the countries like Sri Lanka, Nepal, or Bangladesh, or anywhere. So women participation in politics, women in decision making, women empowerment, huge funding. But when they are doing like that, they don't ask. So international community, the Peace Network and South Asian Network should very much focus and ask our participants when they have conference, when they have meeting, to bring more women, and we need to hear from women. Even in this conference, around 12 participants, I appreciate the organizer, at least we have 3 women to talk about it. So we need to hear more women, and without women voice in decision making and peace initiative, so it's difficult to South Asia to enjoy peace. Thank you.
Thank you very much, comrade, for raising such important issues. And I think it is time we realize and understand the need to centralize women in all spheres of life, including peace, bringing in peace. And I think unless we do that, maybe sustainable peace can never come. And as far as this conference is concerned, we were targeting for 5 women, but unfortunately we couldn't get 2. They had to go out because of certain other reasons. So we have now a little less number than what we had originally felt. Anyway, so now we come to Karamat Bhai, Mr. Karamat Ali of Pilar, Pakistan. He has been a patron, a guide, and a partner of COVA right since our inception. And as I had mentioned earlier, he is a true citizen of South Asia. I would like to request him to, he has heard all the speakers. I would like to request him to please try and make some concrete proposals, suggestions, action points from a South Asian perspective. And Karamat Bhai, if you permit me, because of the paucity of time, we would request you if you can restrict yourself to 5 or 6 minutes. We'll be very grateful. Thank you very much. South Asia is yours. Please go ahead.
Please unmute yourself, Karamat.
You're on mute. Please unmute yourself.
Azhar Bhai, can you hear me?
Yes,
Hello?
Karamat Bhai. Yes, Karamat Bhai, loud and clear. Please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, and my regards to all the panelists. I really feel very humbled that I should be saying something about the way forward. There were people who I really respect, and they have made very, very good suggestions. First of all, let me thank you for organizing this, to remember a great human being and our leader. I was very, very close to him, Swamiji, and I wish he had been with us today and guided us what to do. Unfortunately, he is not there. But it is a great tribute to him, and we should follow what he tried to do in his life. He was the greatest champion of the rights of the bonded labor and interfaith harmony. And these are 2 things that we need to deal with urgently, because these are South Asian unfortunate developments. But anyway, everyone has to leave at some point. So I would like to say very briefly, because things have been said. We have all these problems, the interreligious conflicts, we have ethnic conflicts, and we have also the issue of gender equality, which are on the top of list in South Asia. Right now, we have 2 examples that we can think about to follow. One is from Nepal, which is that Nepal has been able to create, for the first time in South Asia, a truly representative parliament. Can you imagine in a country like Nepal, you have 40% women who are represented in the parliament, and you have workers and peasants and everybody, and no section of society is out of that parliament. So we have only one parliament which is truly represented. We have 40% representation of women. And my very dear friend is now the president of Nepal, who was a trade unionist. And I mean, the list goes on. We don't have much time, but there is One thing that we need to have representative parliaments. We need to really have a truly democratic setup in all South Asian countries. Only then we will be able to deal with all these other things that the ruling elites impose upon us. The second thing that we should keep in mind is from Bangladesh. You know, Bangladesh, before it became Bangladesh, was the majority of the population in the country called Pakistan. And that was a serious problem for the elite in West Pakistan. Now, Bangladesh is the only country in South Asia which has controlled the population issue. Now, we have more people in Pakistan than in Bangladesh. Earlier, Bangladesh used to be, East Pakistan used to be 60% of the population. And they have been able to do it. And somebody interviewed Sheikh Hasina. I have a lot of respect for her. I have met with her. I had met with her father also. And my leader during the One Pakistan time was Maulana Bashani, who was a great leader of the peasants. And they have done it. She was interviewed and she said two things. She was asked, how have you managed to do this? And she said, we have done two things. We have sent the mullahs back to the masjid, the mosque, and we have sent the army back to the barracks. I think that's a very, very precise and great statement. So we have to follow these two countries in South Asia, and we need to develop a South Asian identity. All these other identities are working against the people, whether it's ethnic or religious or gender, they're working against the people. So we have to really commit ourselves to a South Asian identity. And what is happening, I tell you, the last time we met in Nepal, we had this institution called People's SARC. Unfortunately, it has become dysfunctional. Everything pro-people has become dysfunctional since 2016, when the Indian Prime Minister, the great Democrat, decided we will not have the SARC summit. We have to really commit ourselves to a South Asian identity and a SARC process. If we don't do that, we are doomed. We can say whatever we like, nothing good will happen. So, can I tell you something? I have a family in India. Last time when I applied for a visa, I got a visa only for New Delhi for 7 days. So this is the kind of interaction that we have in SARC, and we are not doing anything. We must restore this process. And the last meeting of the People's SARC that we have was in Kathmandu, and there was a SARC, People's SARC Charter, which focused on the need for a South Asian Charter for minorities and a South Asian Charter for democracy. Unless we follow that, we are not going anywhere. So my request to everybody here is that we should demand of all these, there are these two countries which are the major problem for the people of SARC's advancement. This is India and Pakistan, and now Afghanistan. We should also, there is the SARC Social Charter, which has agreed that all citizens of member states of SARC will have the right to go to another member state, be settled there, and also access if there is a social security system. We should demand that all SARC countries should allow Afghan people who want to leave this terrible mullah regime in Afghanistan, they should be allowed to come and they get visa on arrival as we get visa on arrival in Nepal. No other South Asian country does that. So we should do that and help those people who are under threat from violence and murder and all that from these bloody Taliban, who have been imposed now upon the people of Afghanistan by the Americans. They did not conquer Kabul. They have been handed over this Kabul place. So my request to everybody is that Mother Bhai, we should do these things more often and more regularly and look at what needs to be done. And we should intervene in the SAARC process more effectively and demand. There is already a SAARC convention on combating terrorism, and this is the time when we initiate and push for that all SAARC member states should do that. And who are the terrorists? We should identify them. But in the meantime, we should provide support to all the citizens of Afghanistan who are in danger and want to leave their country. They should be allowed to come and stay in whichever country they can stay. So we need to develop this South Asian identity, adopt what has been done.
30 seconds, Karamat Bhai, if you please.
Yeah, I've done. I've finished. We should look at the constitution of Nepal and the strategies of development in Bangladesh and follow them. Thank you very much.
Karamat Bhai, thanks a lot. Especially your suggestion of developing South Asian identity among others. I think this could be a real panacea for all the ills that we have. I think all of us should try for this. At this point, I would like to recognize and invite Admiral Ramdas, former Chief of Indian Navy, who is also with us. And he has been a very close associate of Swami Agnivesh Ji. And he, I think, has fought 3 wars successfully. And ever since he retired from the military, he has been waging a huge battle for peace. And he's been soldiering undeterred for so many years with us. And we are privileged to have him today. Ramdas Sahab, please, we would like to request you to please speak, and if possible, on can military be an option in South Asia? And because of limited time, yeah. Yes, Ramdas.
Well, I thought I'd come to speak about my friend Agnivesh, but I think what I'll do is, in the olden days, I could speak quite easily. Not that I have lost control of the language, but I have lost control of many other genes somewhere. So I will read out my text if you don't mind. Swami Agnivesh and myself were members of an interfaith delegation led by the late Nirmala Didi Deshpande to Gujarat in end March 2002.
Yeah.
This was soon after the terrible events following the burning of the train at Godhra, where thousands of innocent Muslims were slaughtered in one of the worst examples of communal frenzy in the history of our nation since partition. It was in those stressful times that we got to know each other and developed a deep respect and an abiding affection for each other that endured till the passing away last year of Swamiji. It was indeed an unusual combination of a military man and a saffron-robed Swami. Neither of us fitted into the popular perception of either the military or of the saffron Swamis. And yes, we were different, and that is possibly what brought us together. Most of the speakers today have expressed their concern about the increasing violence and threat to peace in the South Asian region. A word about the military and militarism might be useful as we speak about a way ahead. Yes, I have been a military man who has worn uniform for over 4 decades. I've been involved with many of the wars and conflicts in our region. Today, I ask myself, what have we achieved for the good of our people? Wars only sow the seeds for the next war. And I believe deeply that there are no winners in war. The future demands that we should strive to resolve our issues through continuing dialogue, people-to-people contacts, through all conflicts and contentious situations. This is the peace that I would like to see for our children and grandchildren and perhaps even great-grandchildren, who knows. So thank you all very, very much for giving me this opportunity to say a few words on my dear, dear friend Swamiji, who unfortunately, as I mentioned earlier, left me too soon. And we have been great, well, buddies throughout our lives, at least mine so far and his. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Ramdas ji. Really appreciate, really grateful. Now, I had already introduced Ms. Lalita Ramdas. She was the former international chairperson for Greenpeace. She is with us, and she has been very, very active in promoting peace. A lot of peace initiatives in South Asia. So I would like her to, and she's been very close associate of Swami Agnivesh ji also. So apart from and along with paying homage to Swamiji, a little bit about the importance of people's peace initiatives. So Lali Appa, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Mazhar Bhai, and also a very wonderful and warm hello to many, many of you who have spoken today. Just seeing people from every country in our region has been absolutely remarkable. And I think it's a very, very important initiative that you've taken. Parvez, Kanak, so many of you have been old friends. But I want to just focus, and I'm fully aware that we're extremely short of time, that my first and closest and most vivid memory of working with Swamiji, everybody else has talked a lot about the theories of peace and of religion and spirituality and so on. I see Swamiji and remember him as a man of action. The year was 1984, and it was the first day or the second day of November after the terrible slaughter of Sikhs in the capital. And a group of us went out because we'd had reports of horrible violence in one of the colonies of Delhi called Lajpat Nagar. We were women, men, students, and Swamiji with us, a towering figure in his wonderful saffron turban. So as we were walking down some of these narrow gullies and we turned a corner, suddenly we saw in front of us a huge mob of basically men, young men, most of them, with iron rods, trishuls, sticks, and lathis in their hands, and walking with a lot of anger, slogans, Jai Shri Ram. I mean, talk about weaponization of Ram and religion. We were not sure what we should do. Swamiji just told us all very silently to stop. He indicated that all the women in that group should come up into the first 1 or 2, 3 lines. The men fell back, and then we kept walking until we were about 20 to 30 feet away from each other. And with nothing else, and I said, if somebody, one of these guys, just picks up that iron rod and decides to attack, well, that's it. None of us is going to remain alive. And I said, gosh, my husband's at sea, out in Vizag. Who is going to tell him? Anyway, the thought was gone. Swamiji was with us. He said, well, without even planning it, we all put our hands together, said namaste, we smiled, and we stood still. And it was like you could hear everybody's pulse and heart racing. They turned around and they went back the way they had come from. And this was a memory which I think some of you who might have read Amitabh Ghosh, he wrote it, I think, in the New Yorker. But it is something which was profound. Not much was said. All I knew is as we moved ahead, there were Sikh families who came out of their hiding places, stood on the balconies, smiled, waved at us. This was the kind of message that I think we needed to give out. Most importantly, though, what are the lessons that we have learned? For me, it was above and all everything else. As Nalini has pointed out, the only one I think to have done so clearly, to articulate that we have simply not understood or used enough the role of women as peacemakers. It's not just as homemakers, but women bear the largest brunt of the cruelty of violence, of war, and of conflict. So it is women who I think have the biggest stake, shall I say, in building peace. And Swamiji understood this, and which is why he did what he did. I've illustrated this with a very, very simple example. This was a man who had the leadership, the vision, the courage, and what he said is that remain calm, never give up the struggle for justice and truth, and never fear speaking up. Today, I believe that certainly in my country, and maybe many other countries in our region, there is a fear that has completely sealed our lips, and we are not talking, we are not speaking. And once we reach out to each other, I think we have to get also the courage to speak up, to speak out. I love the people who talked about having new kinds of content in our schools, in our classes. That has to happen side by side with working and speaking up and being out on the streets, no matter what, to restore that vision, which was Swami Agnivesh's vision for a very, very different spirituality, a very, very different society, and a very, very vibrant, peaceful, friendly South Asia. So that's really all I want to say. And thank you, Karamat, for organizing this fantastic evening today. Not Karamat.
Thank you very much, Laliappa. Thank you very much for this message and for this experience. I think it's wonderful. Now there is no time, but in Goa also, we have our women volunteers really preventing a lot of violence, a lot of riots. I think one can learn from all such experiences. Now we come to the question and answer session. I would like to now request my colleagues, Ms. Aparna Ghosh and Mr. Moinuddin Ali Khan, to just present the questions before the panel, and the people to whom, the panelists to whom the question is posed, kindly respond. Thank you. Go ahead, Aparna.
Hello, everybody. We have got a few questions from the viewers. So one, Mr. Murugesan is asking a question to Dr. P. Sarvamuthu. Would you please explain how ahimsa would be a relevant tool?
One minute. I think Mr. Sarvamuthu may not be there. I'll just check.
Okay.
No, he's not there. Can you go to the next question, please?
Yeah. I'll go to the next one. It's is Ms. Shima Karmani. I think this is addressed
generally.
This is a general question by one Shima Karmani from Pakistan, and any of the panelists can answer this. The Taliban takeover that has happened in Afghanistan is a manifestation of extreme fundamentalism and is already spilling over in Pakistan, will spill over to India and all South Asian countries. This is what they say. What steps are, the question was, what steps we as South Indian peace lovers should be taking in this situation?
Yeah, may I request Ms. Sabha Sahab to respond to this, because I think this is actually, you will be able to answer best, because you have already suffered, you and your people have suffered most because of this phenomenon. Ms. Sabha Sahab.
Well, I think the others will be in a better position, because it's important for these neighboring countries and other countries to really think about what can be done, because as I said, it's not the only problem of Afghanistan and its people, but it also has and will hugely impact the other countries. So it's a question for all of us. But I would certainly ask for especially the people of these countries for to show solidarity, to show their practical support in whatever way is possible, because right now there is a need for any kind of help. The Afghan people, children, women, men, everyone needs. So whether it's in terms of protection, whether it's in terms of providing other opportunities, whether it's accommodation, even to put pressure on their governments to open their borders, for example, Pakistan or even India and other countries, because they have turned their back to on the Afghan people. And this is a betrayal. This is a tragedy against a population that has suffered for so long. So I think everyone, every voice matters in this situation. And we would really welcome and appreciate that the people of these countries, especially our neighboring countries, people in India and every part of the world, stand by Afghan people. And I say this, it's not just for us, but it's for all of us, because we see the devastating impact, the brutal impact, and sooner or later it will burn. This phenomena, this fundamentalist tragedy will burn, because already Afghanistan is burned. In fact, nothing is left in that country except hopes and dreams and aspirations, which are still alive and which still is there in people fighting. So this fight, in order to keep on this fight, in order to not let other countries become another Afghanistan, we have to stand together. We have to have show solidarity. We have to say no to the governments that are involved, that are so brutally supporting the most misogynist and the most brutal groups in Afghanistan.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Sabha. I think it's a very good suggestion that you have given. May I request the next question, please?
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, as per your timeline. This question is addressed to Mr. Parvez Hoodboy from Pakistan. And the question is asked by one Mr. Syed Muhammad Abbas. The question is, sir, I do not agree with your view that Quran is not pluralistic, but still the bigger question is that how far the establishment with whatever ideology is able to provide justice to the people. May good ideology is not enough as seen today. How do you explain this? My question, sir? Should I?
I didn't quite understand the question. Can you repeat it or paraphrase it?
Okay, sir. I think he wants to know that mere good ideology is not enough in today's world. How do we bring this in today's context in order to?
I don't think we need ideologies at all. What we need is the ability to think for ourselves. Now, when there's a Hindutva ideology or where there's an Islamist ideology, they take away from our humanity. The fact is that each one of us is endowed with common sense, with the power to reason, the power to feel for others. We do not need ideology. And here is the critical mistake that is being made in Pakistan. There is an insistence by the government, by the establishment, that Pakistan has to be an ideological state. This is utter stupid folly. What we need to be is a normal state. A normal state doesn't have ideology. It values only one thing, which is the well-being of its people.
Thank you so much, sir, for this response. Mr. Parvez Hoodboy has answered your question. The next question is to Mr. Ram Punyani. Yeah, the next question is to Mr. Ram Punyani, and it is by Mr. Farhatullah Babar. So I'm reading out the question as it is. Extremist religiousness narratives threatening peace in the region cannot be fought by military force alone. They can be fought only intellectually in an atmosphere of free discussion and debate over a long period of time. How can countries in the region work together or separately towards this end?
Sorry, Aparna, Mr. Ram Punyani had to catch a flight, so he's left already.
Okay.
So you can ask one last question and then we will conclude. One last question. Please name the speaker and then the question.
Okay.
Hurry up, please.
Yeah, we are done with the questions.
Okay, fine. Thank you very much. Now, because we are already behind schedule, so I would like to propose a note of thanks. Because there is not much time, we would like to thank each and every panelist here who had spared their time. It has been a wonderful session, and all the participants who had come in and who had heard the seminar, this webinar, and who have been with us right through. We are going to have this was going live on both YouTube and Facebook, and we will share the recording of this with all our friends, not only here but also those who had registered but could not participate. Thank you all. Thank you everyone individually. Thanks a lot. So we will now conclude this webinar, and we'll be in touch with our, and very happy that we have been able to pay this homage to Swami Agnivesh and remember him on his birthday, and also together celebrate this International Day of Peace. Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mazhar Bhai.
Thanks a lot to all, and let's keep in touch and let's take this forward.
Sure.
That's for sure. Okay.
Yeah. Leave the meeting now, and thank you all very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.